Member for Sandringham.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to speak on the State Taxation Amendment Bill 2024. Speaker, Tuesday's budget last week was an opportunity for this Labor government in its 10th year, delivering its 10th budget, to axe tax and not to increase it, to end blowouts, to maintain frontline services, to make housing more affordable, to fix roads, to keep communities safe, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, for future generations of Victorians not yet born, that this government's opportunity in last Tuesday's budget was to outline a credible plan to pay down Labor's record debt. And I'm sorry to say, Acting Speaker, that on all of those counts, after 10 years of a Labor government, Treasurer Pellis's 10th budget, he failed. This government failed, and that is a very, very poor outcome for the state of Victoria and for the 6.7 million residents of Victoria as well. Now, I understand that in this budget, that in this state taxation bill, there are two taxes that will be increased. Those taxes are the Fire Services Levy and the Waste Services Levy as well, Labor's bin tax. Both of those increases in taxes total about $1 billion in additional revenue over the next 4 years. Now, the thing is, Acting Speaker, that $1 billion might not seem a lot to some people in this place. It might just simply be numbers on a page. But the reality of that $1 billion in additional revenue, Acting Speaker, is that someone has to pay it. Someone has to pay that additional $1 billion in revenue. And the people that have to pay that additional $1 billion in revenue that this government has booked in this year's budget are the Victorian people. Are the Victorian people in the middle of a cost of living crisis, when they're paying more for grocery bills, they're paying more for power bills, they're paying more for fuel, they're paying more for education, they're paying more to keep a roof over their head with increases to interest rates. At a time when Victorians can least afford it, what this government is doing in last Tuesday's budget is increasing the tax burden on Victorians. Someone has to pay that additional about $1 billion in revenue, and that is Victorians. At the worst possible time in our state's history, more taxes are being charged on Victorians. Now, these two increased taxes are number 54 and number 55. New and increased taxes since this Labor government were elected 10 years ago. That's right, Acting Speaker, 55 new or increased taxes at the hands of a state Labor government over the last 10 years. And again, Acting Speaker, these numbers, these taxes, these increases might simply be numbers on a page, buried somewhere deep within a budget book. But the reality of it is that someone's got to pay for those new or increased taxes. And the people that have to pay for those new or increased taxes are Victorians. I am deeply concerned, Acting Speaker, at the missed opportunity by this government in their budget to reduce tax, to axe tax instead of increasing it. That was the opportunity. Because the greatest cost of living measure that any government can offer their people, their citizens, is to cut tax, is to axe tax, is to reduce tax. But no, that opportunity was missed. And I am deeply concerned, especially when it comes to property taxes, Acting Speaker, that of the 55 new or increased taxes that this government has placed on the shoulders, burdened on the shoulders of Victorians in the last 10 years, that around half of those new or increased taxes are on property. And people may wonder why we're in the middle of a housing crisis, why we're in the middle of a housing affordability crisis. And it's not just supply, but there are further reasons behind that. And I argue, Acting Speaker, that one of the very real reasons behind our current crisis when it comes to housing availability and affordability is the taxes imposed or increased, the new taxes imposed or increased on housing by the state Labor government. Now, I don't think it's unfair, and I don't think that there would be any member in this place or in the other place that would disagree with the principle of a Victorian who needs a roof over their head to get a roof over their head. I don't think there would be any member in this place or the other place who would disagree with the principle that having a roof over your head provides you with the stability and the certainty that you need, that you require in order to be a net contributor to the community around you, to give you that stability, to give you that certainty, to give you that confidence to be able to be a net contributor to your community, to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, to find a job, to earn a wage, to pay your way in life, to provide opportunities potentially for other people around you. And that is the missed opportunity in last Tuesday's budget. And that is the missed opportunity that this government has actually set aside by not axing taxes, but increasing taxes, and by introducing new taxes over the last 10 years. I think it's a great shame that this opportunity was missed. A great shame. There was no movement from this government in last Tuesday's budget to axe their schools tax. And the Shadow Minister for Education is currently sitting at the table. She will agree with me, I am sure, that Tuesday's budget last week was an opportunity to axe Labor's schools tax. But they didn't do that, Acting Speaker. They didn't do that. And so the basic principle of educational choice that has been the hallmark of bipartisanship agreement within this state and within the country, thank you, Member for Kew, within the country for decades, if not more, has been completely undermined by the opportunity, the missed opportunity in last Tuesday's budget to axe Labor's schools tax. See, when the Labor government introduced their schools tax in last year's budget, Acting Speaker, what they did was effectively declare class warfare. What they did was effectively say to those parents around the state that we want to tax aspiration. We want to tax your opportunity to send your kid to the best school for them on their terms. We want to make it harder for you to make that choice for yourself and for your family and for your children. There is a myth in this state at the moment, Acting Speaker, and the myth is an insidious myth. The myth is that only rich people, only people who can afford it, send their kids to an independent school or to a high-fee-paying Catholic school. That is an absolute myth. I have heard stories, having spoken to principals right around this state, that some of their parents, some of the parents of the children that go to some of those independent schools, they are working a second shift in a taxi in order to pay the fees, in order to give their kids the opportunity of a lifetime to have the best education that they can possibly have. And Labor's response to that, Acting Speaker, is to tax them more. We know, because we've heard from some of these schools, that their schools tax, Labor's schools tax, is adding around $1,000 in additional fees to the price of education in independent and some high-fee paying Catholic schools. That's not good, because, again, someone has to pay. And again, it's Victorians who are paying the price of the economic mismanagement and the economic recklessness of 10 years of the state Labor government. The thing here is, Acting Speaker, that if the poor economic decisions that have quite clearly been the hallmark of this government over the last decade, if we translated poor economic decisions and economic recklessness to a family budget, or if we translated poor economic management and reckless economic decisions to a business budget, it would be the family who pays the price for the decisions that they make. It would be the business that pays the price for the decisions that they have made. But the great injustice of this budget, Acting Speaker, is that when this Labor government, after 10 years of Labor, after 10 years of Labor budgets, makes a poor economic decision, a reckless economic decision, and there are any number of those that I can think of, it's the Victorian people that pay the price for the poor economic management of this Labor government. It is simply not fair. It is simply not fair on Victorians who are at the moment finding it hard to make ends meet, who are putting their kids to bed, sitting around the kitchen table and figuring out how in the hell they are going to pay the bills. These are the stories. This is the truth of the conversations that are happening around kitchen tables right now, and they just don't get it. They say they care. This government say they care, but their actions, Acting Speaker, tell a very, very different story. If they actually did care, they would have used the opportunity of last Tuesday's budget to axe tax and not to increase it, to provide that cost of living support that Victorians right around this state, not just in metropolitan Melbourne, but right around this state, in growth suburbs, in country areas, right to the borders of this state, absolutely need right now. It was a missed opportunity and they didn't take it up, and Victorians are paying the price for 10 years of Labor. There was an opportunity, Acting Speaker, in last Tuesday's budget for this Labor government to axe their health tax. They didn't axe their health tax. In fact, they will deny that such a thing in fact exists. Well, I would love the Health Minister or the Premier to meet with Dr Hussain, who I met with me, and tell him that their health tax is nothing but an imaginary thing. It is far from it. It was Dr Hussain who services the Tullamarine region of Melbourne, who has 40,000 patients on his books, that told me the story of receiving a payroll tax bill from the State Revenue Office with tears in his eyes, not just for that financial year, but backdated for 5 financial years. And the bill arrived at one time in one piece. The truth of the matter, Acting Speaker, is this. Dr Hussain couldn't pay that bill. Dr Hussain couldn't pay that bill, a bill that this Labor government denies actually exists in the first place. And the great tragedy of this is that those 40,000 patients that Dr Hussain and the group of his general practitioners see provide that important, essential primary health care for, he's had to close down his practice as a result. Because if he can't pay the bill, then he's trading as insolvent, which then voids his insurance, which puts 40,000 people, 40,000 of our fellow Victorians in and around the Tullamarine region at greater health risk because of decisions that this government has made. What happens in this place matters. Decisions that are taken in this place matters. The words that are said in this place matters. But this government, after 10 years of governing and after 10 Labor budgets, simply can't compute that. The impact of that decision on those 40,000 patients in that area of Melbourne is this. When they are sick, they will either not go to see another GP, where they'll no doubt need to pay, Medicare bulk billing will not even be available to them. They may not go to see a GP because they can't afford the price of a non-bulk bill GP appointment. So they'll delay their health care, or what they'll do is they'll go to an emergency department at a public hospital and clog up an existing system that is already under pressure and already under strain because of the mismanagement of this government over the last 10 years. Whichever way you look at it, Acting Speaker, this is a bad decision and a bad outcome. Again, last Tuesday's budget was an opportunity to axe tax, not to increase it. It was an opportunity to axe Labor's schools tax. It was an opportunity to axe Labor's health tax. And they did neither. And Victorians are paying the price for the poor economic management, the reckless economic management of this Labor government after 10 years. There was an opportunity in last Tuesday's budget to increase funding for roads, but no, the Labor government did not do that. In fact, the Labor government reduced road maintenance funding again. They reduced road maintenance funding again. That is a great shame. Having driven to a number of regional communities in the last little while, I was in Shepparton and Bendigo only last week, I can tell you firsthand that Dodge the Pothole is a game, a dangerous game, often played by Victorians when they are driving between regional communities in this state. It is not good enough, Acting Speaker, for this Labor government to simply say that we will reduce the speed limit on regional roads as a safety measure, acknowledging that there are potholes on those roads which are dangerous and which are unsafe. That is unacceptable, Acting Speaker. That is most definitely unacceptable. Reducing the speed limit on a dangerous road is not fixing the road. Fixing the road is getting a work crew out there to fix the road. But again, in this budget, instead of axing taxes, they've also axed road maintenance funding, which means that those bad roads in regional communities will again will not be fixed. You see, Acting Speaker, budgets are so much more than numbers on a page. They are so much more than spreadsheets and percentages and charts and words. They are so much more than thousands of pages of documentation. They actually demonstrate to the Victorian community the heart and the soul of a government, the priorities of a government, what actually makes up the DNA of a government, what their priorities are. And my view is, my strong contention is, that in this budget, this government has got that all so wrong. They say that this government is about families. But as I said yesterday in my budget reply, Acting Speaker, they're spending more on servicing debt than they are on the entire suite of families, fairness and housing in portfolio projects and commitments. That actually tells you in one neat sentence that their priorities are debt instead of what they say their priorities are, which is helping families. And families around this state know it because they're experiencing it, and they've had to experience it over the last 10 years. This is a terrible circumstance, Acting Speaker, a terrible circumstance, and Victorians are paying the price after 10 years of Labor. In the property sector alone, there have been $21.5 billion in taxes, crippling the property sector, Acting Speaker. That take in this budget includes $7.8 billion in land tax, $10.1 billion in land transfer duties, $1.49 billion in COVID debt levy land holdings, $1 billion in a fire services property levy, $127 million in the congestion levy, $221 million in the Metropolitan Improvement Levy, $125 million in the windfall gains tax, $25 million in the Metropolitan Planning Levy, $278 million in the Financial Accommodation Levy, $250 million in the Growth Area Infrastructure Contribution Levy, $21.5 billion of crippling taxes on the property sector. And we wonder why the cost of housing is going up, instead of stabilising and perhaps even, at some point in the future, going down. But this Labor government quite clearly, not by their words, but by their actions, is simply not interested in doing that. They're not interested in making life easier for Victorians. They're interested in making life harder for Victorians. And I don't just say that because it is a nice, two-line statement that could quite easily fit into a social media clip at some point in the future. I say that because it is the absolute, hand-on-heart truth that Victorians know. And Victorians know it because they are on the receiving end of it. In 1 year, the average electricity bill has gone up by 24%. In 1 year, the average gas bill has gone up by 35%. In 1 year, the average rent bill has gone up by almost 17%. Work cover bills have skyrocketed under this government. Transportation costs have skyrocketed. Port of Melbourne fees have skyrocketed, adding to the cost of importing and exporting goods. Payroll tax threshold is simply not competitive, certainly when you compare it to New South Wales. Insurance costs have skyrocketed. The cost of building and maintenance works is higher than ever. If you can, in fact, find a tradie to undertake the work that needs to be done. And on top of this, the government has increased its bin tax and their fire services levy. Now, Acting Speaker, last week I was in Bendigo and I spoke at a budget breakfast there, a post-budget breakfast on Thursday morning. It was an early start to the day and I made my way to the budget breakfast and I sat down and I was introduced to the table that I was sitting at, and there was one lady there who I spoke to, and she seemed to be quite alert for 7 o'clock in the morning and quite with it. which was surprising as I hadn't yet had my morning coffee. And I spoke to her and I wanted to understand her story. And she's told me that because of the increasing taxes on her business, because of the increasing costs for her to do business, she was up at 3 o'clock in the morning at her business before this breakfast to get on top of the orders that she had because of the taxes, because of the charges, because of the increasing cost of business, she's had to lay off a staff member. So instead, she gets to her business at 3 o'clock in the morning to get on top of those orders, and then she came to the business breakfast. This is the experience of Victorians around this state. Last year in my budget reply, I spoke of the Hyatt charcoal chicken place, and I look forward to getting back there at some time in the near future. Their cost of spuds has gone up by 20%. Their cost of cooking oil has gone up by about the same amount. The price of chooks has gone up by about 18%, adding to the cost of doing business. Adding to the cost of business. And I highly recommend to any member of this chamber that if you want a decent feed, the Hyatt charcoal chicken is the place to be. There are critical CFA projects, Acting Speaker, that have been delayed because Labor are increasing their fire tax. Now, I'm joined by the table by the member for Polwarth, the Shadow Minister for Emergency Services and the Shadow Minister for Housing. Earlier today, we put out a media statement together which outlined the parlour state of the CFA projects that have been delayed despite the increase in Labor's increases to their fire services levy. Regional Victorians, Acting Speaker, will pay the price of Labor's financial mismanagement with a massive fire service levy increase revealed in this state budget. Despite this tax increase, the Labor government have decided to delay 83% of existing CFA capital projects by 1 year. 83% of existing CFA capital projects by 1 year. Only 0.5% of the entire tax take of $188 million is actually being spent on critical CFA projects. So it begs the question, doesn't it, Acting Speaker? It begs the obvious question. As this tax is going up and as Victorians are paying out of their hip pockets for this tax increase delivered in this budget through the State Taxation Amendment Bill that this chamber is discussing at the moment, where is that money going, if not to support critical CFA projects around this state? Where is it going? Well, we know where it's going, Acting Speaker. We know where it's going. It's quite obvious where it's going. It's going to feed Labor's debt beast. That's where it's going. It's like they get the money in wheelbarrows, in buckets, and they've got the minions lined up there with shovels, and it's there, and the debt fire is raging, and you've got the money that comes in, and it's being picked up with shovels and it's being shoved into the debt fire. That's exactly what this government does. It doesn't invest back in critical services and critical projects, critical CFA projects that are needed around this state. No, it only spends 0.5% of the entire tax take on those projects. It doesn't spend any more than that. What it does with the rest of the money that it takes out of the pockets of hard-working Victorians, singles, families and businesses, is that it feeds the debt beast created by this government. Now, this government, Acting Speaker, will have you believe, they will have you believe that their debt position in this state is because of COVID. They will have you believe that. But I encourage you, Acting Speaker, and I encourage those opposite, Acting Speaker, I encourage every Victorian, Acting Speaker, to understand the truth of this matter. Labor's financial mismanagement is not because of debt. It's not because of debt caused by COVID. It is not because of debt caused by COVID. It's because of economic mismanagement and economic recklessness after 10 years of Labor, after 10 Labor budgets. That is the truth of it. We now have the highest debt in the nation, $188 billion. And this government has a plan to pay back around $31 billion only. So by their own admission, they have no plan diddly squat plan to pay back around $150 billion. And why am I concerned by this, Acting Speaker? I'm concerned by this not only as a Victorian, but because it's not just my kids, but it's their kids who will be saddled with the consequences of the decisions that are made by this government today in this chamber. This is the truth of the matter. This is the truth of the matter. It will take this generational theft under the hands of this Labor government is an absolute and utter disgrace. It is absolutely and utterly shameless. Sure, if you believe this government, Acting Speaker, they have a plan to pay back $31 billion. They're paying that back, Acting Speaker, by increasing taxes on Victorians,
what a noble bunch of thieves.
Making life harder for Victorians at a time that they can least afford it, with their jobs tax, with their rent tax, with their taxes on aspiration, with their schools tax, with their health tax, with their increases to the fire services levy, with their increases to their bin tax. That is the consequences of 10 years of Labor. That is the consequences of 10 Labor budgets. Acting Speaker, there are so many things that I could talk about at this time. There are so many things that I could talk about at this time. I do, in the time that I have remaining, just address some of the other matters in this bill.
How do you do that? Spend that much money?
Although the opposition is broadly supportive of a couple of the changes proposed in this bill, specifically in relation to Trust for Nature, specifically in relation to the changes to land tax under various ownership structures, the opposition indicates quite clearly, not just for this chamber but to every Victorian, that we oppose this bill. We oppose this bill. We oppose this bill on the basis that it was an opportunity for Labor to axe tax, not to increase it. We oppose this bill because this was an opportunity for Labor to wind back their schools tax, to wind back their health tax, to wind back their rent tax, to wind back their taxes on aspiration, their taxes on Victorian businesses, and they miss that opportunity. So whatever good might be in this bill, Acting Speaker, it is far outweighed by the missed opportunity. It is far outweighed by the bad. It is far outweighed by the impost of insidious Labor taxes on the hip pockets of Victorian singles and families and businesses in the middle of a cost of living crisis at a time when they can least afford it. We oppose this bill.
Member for Mordialloc.
In the time that I have remaining, I just want to, for this chamber's edification, put into context. I'm happy to go, Minister, at the table for another 10 minutes. I really am. I'm only warming up. Let me put this into context in another way. Last Saturday's Tats Lotto Super Draw, the jackpot was $20 million. Now that prize is usually shared amongst a number of winners. But just think for a moment, Acting Speaker, that you or other members of this chamber were the sole recipients of that $20 million Tats Super Draw First Division prize. Think about the impact that it would have on your families. No more financial worries. Your house paid off. Your kids taken care of by practically whatever you wanted to buy. But on the 8th of March this year, ratings agency Standard & Poor's reported that it expects Victoria's net debt to rise to $247.2 billion by 2027. We're now talking $250 billion of potential debt, according to this internationally renowned and respected ratings agency. Well, let's put that $20 million into context. To repay the projected 2027 Victorian state net debt, you would need to win a $20 million Tats Super Draw on your own every Saturday, every week, every year, for 237 years. 237 years of consistently winning a $20 million Tats Super Draw. That is the price that Labor has committed Victorians to. That is the price of their debt. That is the impact of their debt laid bare on the shoulders of every Victorian man, woman and child. Our state's daily interest payments of $26 million, Acting Speaker, our state's daily interest payments of $26 million could pay for 298 paramedics, could pay for 125 ambulances, could pay for 2 breast cancer centres, 2,651 elective surgeries, 307 nurses. $26 million in our current daily interest payment could pay for 510 Victoria Police recruits. I hope they're listening on the government benches because I've got something coming in for them. That $26 million a day, that would pay for 833,000 Victorian ALP branch memberships. I hope that's something. I hope I've put it in terms that this Labor government finally understand. Finally understand. But this is the cost of Labor's debt. This is the cost of Labor's poor economic management and economic recklessness after 10 years of Labor, after 10 Labor budgets. And the tragedy of this is that every Victorian is paying the price for decisions made by this government over the last 10 years. Acting Speaker, I say emphatically to you, to every member of this House and to every Victorian, we oppose Labor's taxes. Last Tuesday's budget was a missed opportunity. Instead of axing taxes, taxes were raised, taxes were increased, and every Victorian is paying the price.